I want to thank you all for joining us today. We are very excited to bring you this webinar filled with stories from different experiences and positions held by our speaker today. My name is Stephanie Bachman, and I'm the Customer Experience Manager for Fear Free. We've started a series of fun webinars to break up your stressful week with something to look forward to. These webinars are intended to give you a mental break, learn something new and fun, or cater to your own emotional and mental well-being. This webinar will be recorded and live on our webinar page, exclusive for members for reference at a later time. I am going to request that everyone type their questions in the Q&A section in the bottom bar of your screen in the Zoom webinar window, or you can use the icon at the bottom to raise your hand if you wish to personally ask the question. All questions will be answered or addressed at the conclusion of the webinar, and those with their hands raised will be given access to speak their own question amidst the written ones. Our speaker requested that I send out a poll before he gets started so we know what our audience demographic looks like today. So I'll be sharing a poll here in just a second. If I could please ask you that you complete that while I introduce our speaker. So Dr. Mark Goldstein has spent over 40 years caring, advocating, and fighting for the welfare of animals. The institutions he worked at are all recognized leaders in their respective fields. He was a senior staff clinician in the medicine department at Angel Memorial Animal Hospital in Boston. As head of the Boston Zoos, he led a turnaround for the failing inner-city Franklin Park Zoo. Dr. Mark then moved west with his wife Christine and their 2 daughters when he was appointed to lead the Los Angeles Zoo. He took the helm at the San Diego Humane Society and SPCA, where he oversaw the design, development, and completion of the San Diego campus for animal care. Many aspects of the campus, its programs, and its unique partnership with the Municipal Animal Care Department have been copied numerous times, both nationally and internationally. His book, Lions and Tigers and Hamsters, What Animals Large and Small Taught Me About Love, Life, and Humanity, was recently published by Health Communications Incorporated and has received numerous accolades for presenting a realistic and thoughtful look into the diverse world of animal care and welfare. I'm going to go ahead and end polling so we can see who we have. Dr. Mark, are you able to see? We have majority DVMs on board. Nurses, we have quite the range here today. Thank you all for showing up. And Dr. Mark did tell me last week that he hopes everybody sits back, relaxes with your beverage of choice in hand, and enjoy some serious and some not so serious stories from his experiences in the animal health care field. Cheers, everyone, and help me welcome Dr. Mark.
Hi, folks. Good evening or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Yes, I did ask Stephanie if you could, bring your beverage of choice. I figure if you get inebriated, I'll come across being better than I am. But it's wonderful to be here. I do want to take a second for a serious statement. My heart goes out, as it does from Dr. Marty Becker, to the people who have been impacted by the hurricane, by the fires, and the stressful world we live in right now. I really feel for those really significantly affected. So best to you. Please share that statement with people who couldn't join us because of those crises. And I hope they'll get to see this at another time when it's on the Fear Free website, and it might even make it to YouTube. With that, we'll get started. Lions and Tigers and Hamsters. And this is a time to have fun. I'll throw in some facts. If you come away laughing a lot and learning a little, I've done my job. But I hope you do learn. So it's all mine. I am Mark Goldstein. Dr. Mark is how I prefer to be addressed, as opposed to Dr. Goldstein. I'm not quite that formal. I'm a pretty old guy, but I really enjoy, Dr. Mark is my name. Laugh and learn. Life's better when you're laughing. And who better than Snoopy to tell us that, especially given what we all do. So, well, here's my first wildlife picture. Ever wonder where baby UPS trucks come from? I hope everybody in the audience is adults, or else somebody's going to have to explain something here. But in any case, this is what happens when you lock a veterinarian up or ask a veterinarian to stay in his house for 7 months now. And he goes looking for wildlife, and that's all I could get in front of my house. to give you an idea of what I'm looking at, because I don't see any of you. And one of the challenges here is to be funny and not know if you're laughing or sleeping or leaving the room or whatever, but I'll try my best. But I asked my office mates, Eeyore and Harold, to join me here just to give me some feedback. You can see they're doing it safely. These are my grandkids that are my inspiration, frankly. And of course, if you're not familiar from Fearful to Fear-Free, that's Marty Becker's book. It's excellent. It's both for people in the profession and not in the profession. It goes a cross-section of, how we can relate to our animals and keep their fear, anxiety, and stress down. And my book, which we'll be talking about in a second. So, Lions and Tigers and Hamsters, What Animals Large and Small Taught Me About Life, Love, and Humanity. The book is stories from my career of 40 years. You heard my introduction from Stephanie. I've been in clinical medicine at Angel Memorial. I have worked at zoos, and I've seen the humane side, and I've loved them all. I think they all have a lot to offer. In the book, every fourth chapter or so asks a question like, should homeless people have pets? What's the future of veterinary medicine? Why does it cost what it does today? I actually, address some of those questions. What's the future of animal welfare? Why do we have zoos and aquariums? I was president of the Humane Society. I've been challenged on that, and I encourage you. There will be Q&A at the end, and I love questions. And if I don't have the answers, I'm good at making them up. Marty taught me well. No. Anyway, I really do encourage you to ask some questions. It's what really gets me stimulated to do these sessions. So let's start with the first story. And this is a primate. We're not going back to too much medicine, but this is a primate. And I think those of you who are professionals understand, and I'm sure everyone will, the spinal cord's not supposed to look like this. It's supposed to be straight. You can see the vertebrae collapsing here and on this side degenerating. What's the prognosis for this patient? Well, surgery did work. Here you see the river, and you can see that it's been straightened out. A vertebrae has been removed to do it, and a plate was put in to stabilize it. Is the prognosis good? I hope so, because it's me. Now, you might ask why I'm showing this as the first story. For those of you who have read the book, there's a couple of stories tonight that come from the book, and half of them do not. Well, this is an Asian elephant, and that's what caused the problem. The story is I was working in a safari park. I went on the island to do some work. The matriarch was Danya. There were 8 elephants there, and I was in a hurry. I knew enough to take her ear, let her smell my feet. That was what she was used to, and walk with her and let her lead, in fact, so she'd be in charge. I patted her trunk, and I said, Danya, I'm here to just pick up a feed pail, and walked away. At which point, I didn't see it coming, but this is probably what came at my back, because she picked me up in her trunk, threw me about 30 feet, 20 feet in the air, broke my arm, busted up my kidney. I wasn't in the best shape, but it wasn't over. Elephants basically kill things because the only predators they really have are lions in Africa and tigers in Asia and humans. And if one jumps on their back, they will throw them to the ground, put their head down, and do a headstand. She ran over while I was on the ground, in shock at this point, and positioned me with her feet. I know that because when I woke up in the hospital, I had 5 toe prints on my back. Asian elephants have 5 toes, Africans 3. And as her head came down, something in the recesses of my mind, thank heavens, went back to the training I'd be given that if you get cornered by an elephant, you get stuck in a spot like that, the only way you'll get their attention is poke them in the eye. And I did, and it worked. She picked her head up for a pause. Thank heavens she threw me to the edge of the island so that I was able to roll off into the island, into the water. And once I was off her island, she didn't care. And she just stood there, swinging the trunk back, making sure I understood, don't do that again. It wasn't quite done because the water was populated with alligators. But thank heavens they were alligators, not crocodiles. They go the other way. This is what I looked like a week or 2 after the accident. And you can see, first of all, it's a few years back because I have a head of hair, but I had a broken arm. This is Danya. This was the elephant. I may look relaxed to some of you, but frankly, internally, I was scared to death right now then. And, but it was the old adage that, if you don't get back on the bicycle, you fall off of it, the horse, you're not going to ever do it. So I forced myself to go back. There is an elephant, a very experienced elephant keeper right behind her. But that's one story there. And that's the challenges of working with wildlife, captive wildlife. You really have to understand their behavior, because the interesting part was people would ask me after this, it was a near-death experience. You know, Mark, you're probably going to pick another profession now. Just the opposite. It confirmed in me that my calling was to become a veterinarian and work with animals. Why? Because I knew I'd made a mistake. Not Danya. She wasn't aggressive. She wasn't mean. Even though people asked when I was in the hospital, are they going to dispatch her, kill her, or what are they going to do to her? Nothing. It was my fault. And knowing it was my fault and understanding behavior became something of a, an interest of mine. And I knew I was doing the right thing. So I'm going to play this in a second. Again, this is the challenges of working with unusual pets, as opposed to dogs and cats and wildlife. You do have to always be, have your attention to them. This is 1 minute long. I apologize. You're not going to hear the verbiage that much. You may hear him talking, but keep your eyes on this little hamster. Just keep watching him, and I think you'll see what I mean.
Do every 4th or 5th chapter, I ask questions like, why do we have zoos and aquariums? Does veterinary medicine cost what it does? Sure. Should homeless people have pets? These are all I take these questions on, and I try to get some answers to them, some insights into what they're about.
Keep your eyes on this little guy.
As president of the Humane Society, I was asked, why do we have zoos and aquariums? Trying to keep animals in captive situations, and there are some terrific reasons.
Goodbye.
Oh, ran right on his feet. We didn't see it.
On live television.
Thanks for bringing your friends in. I'm glad this one survived. I'm glad you survived all these stories. Wow, what an incredible journey through decades of experience hanging out with animals, being close to, as you heard, elephants, rhinos, little guys.
So, part of the challenge of working with animals, and here we are dedicated to reducing fear, anxiety, and stress, and dropping them on the floor is not exactly the way to do it. So, I laugh about it now. He wasn't hurt. I was mortified when he fell internally. And I was mortified when I left the studio. I didn't know how it looked to the public. And, I'm glad I recovered by giving him a kiss, because that was mentioned many times after that. But, Dr. Marty Becker is a friend of mine, and a colleague and a mentor, substantial mentor in my life. And I called him right away, got in the car, called him, and said, Marty, you're not going to believe what just happened. And I sent him a copy of this video. Well, let's switch slides here. We all love Marty Becker. His vision regarding fear-free is transforming the practice of veterinary medicine. I mean, reducing fear, anxiety, and stress. For those of you who don't know what fear-free is, it's basically a whole philosophy from the time an animal leaves its house, first of all, and goes to a veterinarian and comes home, just reducing all of that anxiety that occurs on the pet's part and the fear that occurs. And I encourage you to read Marty's book that I showed you a picture of a second ago. And it goes out further than just veterinary medicine. It goes into, fireworks, thunder, things like that, and how to reduce the fear that comes with it. He's a kind man. We know that. He puts everybody's welfare ahead of his own, people and animals. And he's always there to lend a listening ear. Like in this case, I dropped the hamster on the floor. I was mortified. I called him, and he listened. But there's another side to Marty, because after he looked at the video, I get this email that says, check out some pictures I'm sending. And next time you go on live with a hamster, you may want to get some additional equipment. And that's what he sent me. He's got a devious side, I would say, but he loves life, and so do I, and I took this in stride. And I think he's probably right. So let's go change here. This is an African dwarf crocodile in the top picture. They grow about 4 feet long when they mature. I was director at the Boston Zoos, and at the time was doing a stand-up introduction and educational segment for television. And here's another live television shot. I don't have it, but because it never got taken. You'll see why in a second. I was holding him like this. This is not me, and this is not, in fact, a dwarf crocodile. If people know him, this is a gharial with that long snout. But this is how I was holding him. And he started to get anxious. I could feel it. You know what's coming. He's just not feeling comfortable. So, what I had to do basically is just put him down, let him chill. And, he decided he was going to go towards the cameraman. Well, what the cameraman probably saw, even though that's not the case, was this. And he put his camera down. Well, he actually dropped his camera. And on his way out the door, over his shoulder, when I said, "Don't worry, he won't hurt your camera." And he turned around and he said, "I don't care an effing about my camera. I'm out of here." And he was gone. Sequence never got done. So another episode in my life that I wonder how I made it through it. Just a little bit of a side education here. It's not a great shot, but this is an orange crocodile, and this is real. They live in Gabon, Africa. They live in caves, and it's because they live in caves and they swim in water that's very acidic from the guano from bats is why they turn orange. And they were thought at first to be a different species, but they're not. They're just affected by the acidic water. Quite dramatic to see an orange crocodile, sorry. And of course, probably the first person that saw him and reported that was thought to be crazy until many people started realizing there's a whole group of them. Now, you might ask, living in a cave, what does he eat? Just what you'd expect, one of these. And in today's world, you wonder how he doesn't get sick. I mean, just like bats who harbor all of these different viruses, including rabies, and don't seem to get ill from it, we can learn a lot from that. And we are trying to learn a lot from that. They are a very important species in our life for many reasons: pollinating plants, eating mosquitoes, a number of different things. You might find it interesting that there are 6,495 mammalian species on Earth. 1,300 species are bats. That's how many different species of bats there are. And if that wows you, this might too. Over 1,500 species of rodents. Bats are not rodents. They are different classification. So there, between the two of them, 2,800 of the 64,000 mammalian species on Earth are either bats or rodents. We're outdone by the population. This is a spider monkey. Well, I was at Angel Memorial one day going down the hallway when Dr. Gus Thornton, some of you might know him by reputation, he's now passed away, a wonderful man, another mentor of mine, my father, basically a veterinary medicine. I did my internship there and I was on staff for almost a decade. He saw me passing him in the hall one day and he said, "Doctor, you're missing something." Excuse me? Where's your tie? He liked us to be professional. This is a different time and place. So I took his, not his advice, but his somewhat nice order, went upstairs, got my tie, I had an office with some clothes in it, put a tie on and came back and went into clinics. And right in the middle of clinics, one of my patients was a spider monkey. And I'll say this maybe more than once during this talk. I'll laugh about these things, but people shouldn't have these animals as pets, not just spider monkeys. Wildlife in general takes a lot of work, takes a lot of knowledge, it's expensive, and most importantly, it's not like you get them for a year. Many of them live as long or longer than we do. So it's important that they fall in the right hands, and as pets, they really aren't. But as a veterinarian, it was my duty to make sure he didn't suffer. So I would see them. And this spider monkey came into my clinics, and I was sitting, leaning on a table, writing a record while the owner was holding him. He walks across the table very innocently. I'm still writing. And the next thing I know is he grabs my tie, excuse me, starts to choke me. You have that image? He's got the tie and he's pulling on it and I'm pulling away. And then he starts tearing at the tie with his teeth. So that when he was done, this is not my tie, but this is what it looked like. And I had to loosen the knot to breathe. I excused myself from the room for a second, went running up to Dr. Thornton's office. And Angel's pretty big, but I ran up there. I was a little bit stunned. I asked to see him, and before she said, the administrative assistant said yes, I went through the door and I said, "Gus, this is an occupational hazard." He looked at it. I told him what happened. He just go on. And I was very careful about wearing a tie ever after that. And he never asked me to. Again, let's switch. This is obviously a tiger. Not the one I'm talking about, but I was a veterinarian at the Stone and Franklin Park Zoo in Boston, and we had a tiger by the name of Sasha. She had chronic pancreatitis, and when she had bouts of it, those in the medicine department area will know what I'm talking about, but when an animal has pancreatitis, or a person for that matter, you basically have to go NPO, nothing orally, food or water. You have to let the pancreas, quiet down, and that can go on for a number of days, if not longer. And with Sasha, it was about a week, and every day we had to knock her down. That's one of the challenges of exotic medicine or captive wildlife. A simple problem like an abscess can become life-threatening because of what it takes to treat it. Knocking the animal down every day, making sure they don't tear the sutures out. These are powerful animals. And, doing a C-section on a primate, you might be totally successful. And when they wake up, they pull out all the sutures and hand them to you, or pull the incision apart. So you have to be, it's very challenging. So in any case, it was my responsibility to dart her and treat her. She didn't know me yet. So I was able to pass by the front of her holding area at the hospital and let her see me. We hid the blowpipe because these animals can see the tools that you use. And when they see a dart gun or a blowpipe, they know what's coming and they already get excited. Their fear and anxiety and stress goes up. So, on her behalf, we hid it so she didn't see it. She didn't know me. I walked around back with a veterinary technician, Joanne, and we went into a holding area that was attached to hers. And the plan was somebody else was on the door, operating the sliding door that was between the two. And when I said open the door, he was instructed to open it 1 inch. Okay? Keep in mind, 1 inch, like you get the blowpipe through. As an aside, if you're within 30 feet of me and I have a blowpipe, I'll hit you because I'm pretty practiced in it. So I said, go ahead, John, open the door. And I don't know what went through his head, but he opened it 6 feet. Sasha and I were separated by about the same distance, 6, 8, 10 feet. Thank heavens she was as stunned as I was. I threw Joanne to the back of the exhibit and I yelled, close the effing door. I've told high school students when I give this lecture, that's the use of that word. That's where it's probably appropriate to use it. Not any other time maybe, but when faced with a tiger 6 feet away, it's probably okay. And he did. He closed it in time or I wouldn't be here. And now she was riled and I had to let her settle down, quiet down, because those chemicals that come out when an animal's afraid are not conducive to tranquilization. And we went back in, made sure John understood the plan this time, darted her successfully and treated her. But the ball game was up as far as her knowing me. For the next year or two, realized she was hand raised, so she loved the keepers. But when she saw a veterinarian or someone, she knew was in her mind not friendly, she would instead portray this look. And I would get that every time on rounds. The keepers were amazed. They could walk by and she'd purr and hiss and in a nice way, and I'd walk by and this is what we'd see. Well, time came to introduce another tiger to the exhibit. And those that know tigers know, why are we doing that? Tigers typically in the wild are solitary. They live basically a solitary life. They don't go in packs. They don't go even with their mate. The only time they really come together with another tiger is when they're breeding. And then they're receptive to a male. Otherwise, they just as well not have them around. But people looking at the exhibit kept complaining, oh, she looks so lonesome. She looks so lonesome. And yes, politics enters into all aspects of our life. Science doesn't always win out. It should. But in this case, pressure was put upon me since my budget came from the state of Massachusetts. Mark, we want to stop getting these complaints. Can we introduce another tiger? Which we did. But to do it, we had to take out her implant because we didn't let her cycle. We didn't want to worry about pyometra, uterine infection. We took the implant out and let her cycle. And as I said before, when she went into heat, she would be receptive to having the other tiger introduced into her exhibit. Well, I was on rounds, and the keepers asked me to check Sasha to see if she was in heat. Well, I went around to the barn, went down a long hallway. I was 25 yards probably away from her when she looked through the cage window, saw me, and instead, this is the posture I got. So for that brief time, she thought I was another tiger, I guess. This is, what she's showing here, raising her tail, marking her territory, hissing and purring in a very quiet manner, is that she's receptive. And she somehow thought I was one of those. I never thought of myself looking that good. But this is what we saw, and I could tell the keepers without question, she's in heat. She's in estrus. And we had a successful introduction following that. But weeks later, I went on rounds. Again, I saw the old Sasha hissing, yelling, wanting to eat me after she came out of estrus. So another story. Okay, these are Virginia whitetail deer. I was called one day that a person owned an estate in Peabody, Massachusetts. It's about 12, 15 miles north of Boston. And they wanted me to come up and check them and see if their health was okay. They thought one was limping a little bit. So I, went up there And interestingly enough, as I drove in to the street that surrounded, and it was a compound, there were 3 houses on it, that already put my radar up, and a wall, 10 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet tall, all the way around, not a fence, a wall, cement wall. So it was a compound. Unusual. I looked up at these posts that were surrounding the property, and there were cameras on it. This is in the 1980s. It was not common to have people have cameras with their residents. Now we all have them. But okay, person wants to be secure. I knock on the door of the wall and it opens. And now my radar really goes off because I'm met by 2 gentlemen, and I use that word because I don't want to get them upset. They look like the front line of the Minnesota Vikings. And with them were a couple of Dobermans. It was like out of a movie. Come on, Doc, we'll show you where the deer are. They took me over, and here was this large pasture, but it was all grass, no rocks, no rough surfaces. And the veterinarians online now know where I'm going. Their coat was fine. They looked alert. They were bright and alert and responsive, but their hooves were severely overgrown. There was no way that they could keep them normal. So I explained that all. And I said that I needed to come back if they wanted me to there, but I told them it had to be done because otherwise they'd be in severe pain. And it was why one of them was lame a little bit. And I'd have to tranquilize them because I can't get next to them to do this. And we can take care of their hooves, which they said yes. And they said, come on in, Doc. Mr. Caruana wants to pay you and take care of everything and say hello. Okay, so I'm going to get to meet the owner now of the estate and of the deer. Well, I asked to use the bathroom first, and they said, sure. And they took me up to a kitchen, into the bathroom, and I noticed when I came back out in the kitchen, an entire wall of monitors looking at all the property. Again, this is in the 1980s. This was not commonplace. And I come down to a pool, which has a roof on it, which you could open or close to make it indoor or outdoor. And sitting around this half-moon table was an image like this. I am not exaggerating. It wasn't these guys, but Mr. Caruana in the middle, surrounded by guys that I probably would just as well be polite to, but not know very well. He was friendly as anything. Hey, Doc, thanks. The guys told me, what's going on. You're going to be back. And he's talking to me. He says, how much do I owe you? And I told him. Takes out a roll of bills, pays me in cash. And okay, my responsibility is for the animals. It was a little awkward, but I took it in stride and hoped, frankly, that I didn't have to come back again soon. Well, in between that time and the next visit I'm going to talk about, I mentioned his name to a friend of mine, Dr. George Myers, a veterinarian up in Danvers, Massachusetts. So a good friend of mine. And I mentioned his name, and he, Mark, have you been reading the Boston Globe? And he brought my attention to an article where he was thought to be a hitman for the mafia. I mean, high level. He was the nicest guy in the world to meet, but that certainly put me on guard. Unfortunately, a couple of months later, I get a call. Doc, one of the does died. Okay, what happened? They explained it all to me. He's got a big hole in the side of his chest. Okay, what was going on before that? Well, the male was trying to breed them. This is the third deer that was in there. And I suspect they got into an argument or something happened and he was gored. And I told him that on the phone. Their response was, no, the boss wants you to come out and do an autopsy. Well, I didn't explain it, but everybody online probably knows you don't do autopsies on animals, you do necropsies. Autopsy means on oneself. So I told him I could come up and do it, but it was going to cost a lot because if you do a necropsy, I was taught you do it completely. You don't just do it skin deep, no pun intended. They said, fine, no problem, Doc. I came up and I did a necropsy. The results were pretty, I said with 99% assurance until the histology comes back different. He was gored. She was gored by the male. And I was surprised by the next remark. One of the guys said to me, that's too bad. The male's dead. He's going to be killed. Nobody screws with the boss's deer. So I guess their philosophy on life goes beyond just people. But in any case, I now have to get paid. Well, Mr. Caruana will be right out. Well, to do the tranquilization on deer, I had a gun like this, which is a Pax-Arm gun for discharging darts. And I brought it just in case there was a need for it. So I had it in my possession when Mr. Caruana came out from the pool area, outside now, and lo and behold, he's carrying the exact same gun. And okay, this is really serious. People don't own these. And he said, Doc, I've got the same gun as you. I've got the darts, but I can't get the drugs that you use. Can you get me some? No. But I had to find a way to say no without pissing him off. Carfentanil it's basically M99, a torphine, which was the precursor to carfentanil, which many of you know is this evil drug that is cut into fentanyl and other narcotics and is deadly. A veterinarian up in Canada got a drop of torphine on his cuticle and he died. Couldn't breathe. And they didn't have anything there at the time. The M5050 was in a case, and by the time they got it out, M5050 was the precursor to naloxone. He died because they weren't really sure what had happened first. In any case, I had to say no because, in my mind, what I'm thinking, it's so powerful that you can pull it up into a syringe, empty the syringe, and what's left in the hub of the needle will take away all pain in a horse, allowing them to race. And it's undetectable then. They have better tests today. But I had to politely explain that everything I had was monitored, which it was, and accounted for, and it wasn't possible. And I slowly left. I left out the fact that this time I brought my wife with me because it was surreal. Now, why did I bring my wife? It's not like, maybe she'd defend me, but I needed someone else's eyes to see this whole thing. And, she was there also and really taken by it. So another experience, not one you'd expect in working with exotic animals. So one more story again with exotics or captive wildlife. This is not Gus, but the story's about Gus. This one's in the book. Gus was a rhino, weighed in about 5,500 pounds, almost 6,000 pounds or 3 tons. These guys are basically moving tanks on 4 feet. Their hide in some places is 3 inches thick. They are enormously powerful. Look at that neck attached to this. But they stay away. They're one of these animals that if you mess with me, you're going to get in trouble. If you leave me alone, I'm going to leave you alone. Unless I'm got a female and a baby there, and then I may go after you even if you don't do anything. That was a white rhino. And by the way, white rhino, and they're not white. It comes from the Dutch wide. This is their mouth. It's wide, as opposed to the black rhino, which has a prehensile lip and it comes to a point. That's where the name white rhino comes from. This is basically the kind of dart that was used. This would be the one you'd put in a blowpipe. But for discharging one, 30 yards or something, you've got to have something more substantial, and more so because their hide is so thick. This is about 3 inches long. That's a needle like this with a barb on it because it has to stay in and let the chemicals that you're mobilizing with discharge. So that's what you use. And just to explain how it works inside, you put your drugs in here. Excuse me. Gave away the next slide. But you put your drugs in here, and you put either compressed air here with these darts, or in this dart, you put a 22 charge. Not a bullet, but just a charge from a starter's gun. And when the needle impacts the animal, the charge goes off, discharging the liquid into them. And when you shake the dart afterwards, it rattles because this moves back and forth. Well, the story is with Gus. He was a full-grown rhino, I said, weighing in almost 6,000 pounds. A couple of weeks before the incident I'm about to describe, he had pushed a truck into the lake. That's how powerful he was. And we were doing his physical exam one year, and that meant knocking him down with M99, torphine, and letting him lay down, sit down, get rest, and we'd get out of the Jeep. When I say we, there were 2 rangers, Dr. Cannon and myself, and we went over. The 2 rangers were measuring his horn, measuring his ears, basically checking things and recording them, because that's one of the things of keeping captive wildlife. You want to learn from them. Well, my job was to take his temperature, put a thermometer in his back end, and pull the dart out and get it back. Well, I put the thermometer in, and then I pulled the dart out, and I shook it. Remember, this rattles when you shake it. And when it rattles, it's empty. Well, I took the dart out. I immediately knew something wasn't right because it weighed a lot. And then I shook it, and it didn't rattle. And if you're following this, what it meant was the dart never went off. Gus was sitting there just allowing us to do what we were doing, and nothing you'd expect. Well, I stifled the desire to yell, and instead turned to Joe Cannon and said, "Doc, this dart didn't fire," which they immediately knew what that meant. We stopped what we were doing. I pulled the thermometer out, and as I pulled the thermometer out, Gus opened his eye. And we ran for the Jeep because what we didn't want to land up in is a position like this. We didn't know how happy he was going to be that we were just manhandling him. So we got in the Jeep safely, but it was, I think if you took the heart rate of everybody in that Jeep, everybody was probably well over 100, if not 150. We were lucky. One more time in my life like that. So this is really our last story tonight, but I really look forward to your questions and answers. No, not your answers. I'm supposed to give those. Had a goldfish come in one day in Angel Memorial. I saw all the animals that were, even though hematology and oncology while I was at Angel was really my interest, I would see the non-domestic pets, except for birds that Dr. Marge McMillan and Dr. Petrak saw. You may know Dr. Petrak's name. She wrote the definitive work on veterinary medicine and birds. So goldfish came in, and it was in a tank. It was ironic that the attendant who was going to help was called to help the person bring it in from outside, and it was raining, so she brought a tarp with her. I mean, the fish was in a tank of water. It wasn't necessary, but she didn't realize that. They came in my office, and there was an adult woman with her, and I suspect at this point, even the people listening now are saying, come on, Mark, it's a goldfish. Well, first of all, it was like this goldfish. This is not the one, but it was a fancy goldfish, they're called. They live 10 to 15 years. But that's not the only reason we got involved. The woman was obviously crying when she came in, and she said the goldfish's name was Frank. And she looked at me and she said, I know you're laughing at me maybe, but there's nothing you can do. My friends told me, come on, it's a goldfish. But doctor, my son's autistic. He learned to count watching this goldfish go around the tank. He learned to feed himself by her showing him how important it was. He learned to clean himself watching me clean the tank and helping me. And the last thing he said to me before I left and said I was bringing Frank to the veterinarian was, Mommy, what did I do wrong? She explained this young boy, when he became manic, would sit in front of that tank and quiet down. It wasn't a matter of just getting another goldfish. He would know the difference. So I realized then, just like with so many animals that we all treat, all of the veterinarians and vet techs and people that love animals on listening today, that we do more than just treat animals. Yes, it's important that we treat animals because they're sentient beings and they feel pain and they suffer and they give us unconditional love. And in return for that, we owe them. We owe them health, we owe them food, we owe them shelter, and we also owe them good veterinary care and love. Well, in this case, you might say, how do you love a goldfish? Well, you try to keep him healthy. And he had this big pedunculated tumor off his gills. Looked a little bit like this guy. If you take this tumor here and put it up around the gills and a little bit elongated so it was hanging off, that's what it was happening. But he was starting to list. And it was obvious what would happen. It would outgrow him and bring him down to the ground. So it had to be taken care of. And he was just a couple of years old, so he had a decade ahead of him. And we had a young boy out there that depended on us. I went out, I excused myself, and I didn't find one, but I found two surgeons at Angel. I asked them to come back in. On the way in, I told them the story. By the time they got to the room, they were in just as much as I was to do this. We looked at them. We told her what our experience was and what we didn't know. We said, give us a couple of weeks and we'll come up with a game plan. I made contact with the New England Aquarium. I found out how to tranquilize them basically, or anesthetize them. You could use this experimental drug MS-222, which is now used in general, but at the time was experimental, and it really in the wrong hands could be difficult to use. And then the other is Bromoseltzer. For those not old enough to know what that was or is, it's basically like Alka-Seltzer, and when you put it in water, it gives off carbon monoxide, which is an anesthetic in a certain dose and lethal at a higher dose. We put Bromoseltzer, 2 weeks later, we made a plan to have him come in. We put Bromoseltzer in the water, watched him start to go belly up. One surgeon fished him out of the tank, pun intended, by the way, held him in his hand. My job was to flush his gills with Bromoseltzer-laden water so that he could be oxygenated and kept tranquilized. And Dr. Mike Aronson, surgeon, had to take the tumor off meticulously because you couldn't have any bleeding. You can't put electric cautery on an animal, especially when it's near his gills. And he can't put powder there because it would get in his gills. So he had to do it meticulously. We took it off, sent it down to pathology. Dr. Jim Carpenter, an incredible pathologist, read the slide, and he basically said that it was a benign adenoma, which we thank heavens for. It was benign. And I was able to report that to the owner and tell her that Frank was going to be able to come home, and be fine. And I checked about 6 months later, and Frank was still doing well. I have no reason to believe he didn't go on to live a normal life. Your passion and hard work and skill and compassion. Why do I say that? Because a lot of you listening, you've had some hard times, especially the past decade, especially veterinary technicians. My heart goes out to you. As a veterinarian, I couldn't do what I've done over my career without vet techs. And I know you're underpaid, overworked, emotionally drawn out. People don't understand sometimes how hard you work, especially now in the pandemic. You're taking risks. You're having to do things sort of in an isolated sense. I want you to know that it makes the world a better place for people and animals. What you do is important. And you are an essential worker, as are the veterinarians, as are the other people caring for animals, feeding them, husbandry folks. You do important work because these individuals, when it comes to our domestic pets, give us unconditional love. When it comes to our utilitarian pets, they give us food. They deserve to be treated well. And when it comes to wildlife, they bring beauty into the world. They maintain our environment. We owe all of them. So the work you do is important. Please don't lose sight of it when you're having one of those days that you want to tear your hair out. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed yourself. We've got plenty of time for questions and answers. If we don't have too many, I'll be glad to keep talking. But I hope you're enjoying some beverages. Since I'm talking, I've got my water here. There you go, folks. So a big thank you to Dr. Marty Becker, Stephanie Bachman, and the Fear Free staff for this opportunity to share some time with you. I really enjoy this. It's a highlight of my career now. 67 years old, I can look back and share what I've learned and, take a look at my book, Lions and Tigers and Hamsters, and who has questions for my answers?
Yeah, I am happy to open this up for the questions because the first one that came up is just going to be another story that I'm scared to find the answer to. So tell the story about the mixed up lunch and the fecal sample.
Oh my gosh. Who put that on? Okay.
Kathy.
Kathy. This. Yeah, it really is a story. I was in clinics at Angel Memorial one day. Somebody knows me. And a man came in with his dog. Came in the room. He was there for a general physical. He handed me the tinfoil, which we all hate to see. We prefer to get fecal samples, for a parasite check in a plastic bag or a cup. When it's in the tinfoil, you got to sort of go through it carefully, making sure it doesn't pop out at you. And it's hard to get it off the tinfoil. But he handed me tinfoil, a ball, and he said, "There's the fecal sample, Doc. I'll be right back," because, standard operating procedure at that time was to go in the back. Now we send them out many times, but do it in the back. And there was a technician back there that would do it, but I would look at it first. So I unwrapped the tinfoil. And to my surprise, there was a chicken wing, not a fecal sample. And I didn't think enough probably with this. I went back in the room with the chicken wing and I said to the owner, "I hope nobody sent anybody to school with their lunch today." And he goes, "Oh my God." He had sent his son to school with the fecal sample and brought the chicken wing into us. That's the story.
Oh my God. That is pretty gnarly. We have a couple anonymous attendees who have left questions as well. So we know that you have worked for zoos. So what was the most bizarre thing you have seen working at a zoo?
Most bizarre thing? Boy, I've got a whole bunch. I don't know. Can I tell the gorilla story or rattlesnake? Let's tell the gorilla story. Surprisingly enough, it's usually the people that create it bizarre. I mean, one of the ones I heard, but not bizarre, and this will be an opportunity for me to tell it. I mentioned Dr. George Myers. I was going out of town once, and I asked him to cover for me at the zoo. Well, I should have probably thought, his experience was such that, maybe he has to be more careful than I thought. He did rounds, and a bongo, which is an antelope, had a feed pail stuck on the top of his head. He'd gotten into it, and pulled it up, and got it stuck. Well, George looked at him like a horse. I thought, I'll just go in there and take a broomstick and lift up the feed pail. Well, the story goes he apparently got the stick lodged in there. The bongo, not liking what he did, picked up his head, and their neck is about as big as a rhino's, and lifted George up the ground and swung him around the stall. He got the pail off, he's proud to say, but he, became a windmill first. There's also a story with the gorillas. At Franklin Park Zoo, we had this big tropical rainforest that we made, and it was in the process of being built. The gorillas had just been moved into the holding area in the back, which was a huge set of mazes, really made to reduce their fear and anxiety and stress. And when I look back now, lots of space, lots of ways to segregate them or mix them up. And when I came out one night, there was a SWAT team that used to stay in front of our zoo in their cars, because unfortunately the neighborhood we were in had some real problems. And, I was really glad for them to be there. And I honor those guys tremendously. They put their life on the line for us every day. And I invited them. I said, the gorillas are in. Would you like to come back and see them? Oh, yeah, Doc. Now, these are SWAT officers. They drive their car in. They get out of the car. They're taking guns out of orifices I didn't know we had, putting them in the trunk. Then they come back into the holding area. And we go back, and here's a big silverback male, Sam. And they're standing in front of me, and I'm to the side, and I watch Sam, and I can tell what he's about to do. I mean, this goes back to really being able to read animals, as we all know we can. And I said, hey, guys, he's about to do a mock charge. He can't get to you or anything, but be aware he's going to come sliding across that place faster than you can run and make some real noise. And don't be scared by it. Don't be bothered by it. No. And he came running at them. One officer took his buddy, realized that these are guys that, protect each other from bullets. He takes his buddy and puts him in front of him. And his buddy turns around and goes, what the heck? He goes, hey, guns are one thing. Gorillas, you're on your own. They turn to me and they say, Doc, you got to be crazy to work with them. And literally, just as they said it, their radios go off, shooting on Blue Hill Avenue, Doc, we got to go back to work. It was like, what? You think I'm crazy? Those are the kinds of stories. I think it's a, real understand. People don't understand them sometimes. We understand animals. They understand criminals. So I hope that answers the question, but I can go on all night.
Yeah. No. I think that's good. We have plenty of other questions. I do have one comment that I'm going to say because it is really funny, but Kathy said, as a veterinary ophthalmologist, I'm offended that you poked the elephant in the eye.
Oh, Kathy. Yes. Okay. Kathy may speak a lot lower than you think, because I think Kathy's husband is probably doing this, but it's under her name. But go ahead.
Oh, it definitely could be. So Janie has a question. So Janie, I'm going to allow you to talk so you can ask your own question. So if you go ahead and unmute yourself, Janie, you should be able to. There you go.
Okay, did it. Well, we've all heard that pet adoptions are way up during COVID, so the animal shelters are pretty slim on pickings. And I'm just kind of worrying about what's going to happen when and if things go back to normal, and what are the people that are working and having their pets at home going to do with all these pets then?
That's a great question. It really is. First, Janie is right in that over the past 6 months, especially the first couple of months, shelters saw an incredible rise in people wanting to foster animals or adopt, which was wonderful. It's like so many people woke up to the unconditional love and support they get from animals because they were at home. And there are stories after stories of people saying it's the way they made it through the quarantine because they had someone there to take their mind off it. One of the many things that pets give us. So they were adopted in great numbers. There's two concerns that we harbor, and I think we all should in the profession. One is, think about this, and my own daughter and son-in-law in this situation, they adopted a 4.5-month-old shepherd, German shepherd, just before the quarantine started. Well, he's loving it. Everybody's home. Grandkids are home. They're home. Lots of attention. Well, guess what's happening? He thinks that's normal. So the day comes that they're going to all go back to work, which I think is going to be a while still. But when they start to leave the house, there's going to be some separation anxiety. The same is probably true for infants that were born during this period of time, held by only their parents, never seeing another person. So I think people listening, and please share this with your friends, they need to work at it. Dr. Becker and Fear Free have lots of advice on how to do that properly, by leaving the house a little bit, by giving them a Kong of frozen food maybe, and leaving them alone for an hour, take a walk. You know, there are multitudes of things that you can do. Also address the fact that they've never seen a stranger really in their house. So they're going to either become afraid or aggressive. So there's many things that they're going to have to become used to that they haven't seen for 6 months of their life. The other concern may surprise you, and it may hopefully not be as devastating as we expect, but it's not just that people will go back to work and maybe the ones fostering will have to give up their fosters. But unfortunately, with the economy the way it is, there's predicted an onslaught of people who will be evicted from their homes. And those animals are going to need homes when they're looking for ones themselves. And shelters are not easy to take animals to. So, I mean, I've heard numbers of up to 40% of people in the country will have it go through an eviction process. That's an that is an alarming number. I think the first thing to solving a problem is to become aware of it. So, Janie, it's a great question. I wish I could give you all the answers now. There's neither time nor am I smart enough, but I'd like to encourage people to look into this. All of those will present some real challenges for us. I hope what does last is the greater appreciation that people have for animals that came out of this. Thank you, Janie.
You're welcome.
Realize I need to unmute myself before I start talking again. So I have another anonymous attendee that wrote a question that I think is really excellent. This person recently entered the veterinary field as an LVT, currently works in general and emergency practice that deals with small exotic pets. True interest is in zoo medicine, but wants to get general experience before jumping in. So what advice would you give to those who want to move into zoo medicine eventually?
What's a person's anonymous, he said? Well, Miss Anonymous or Mr. Anonymous, first of all, you've already taken the first step that I would have encouraged. Both veterinarians and vet techs, when they say they want to go into zoological medicine, I encourage them not to do it right out of school. For instance, where a veterinarian's concerned, if the first incision that they have to suture is on a polar bear, where you only get one shot, your hands better be very adept at doing that. So I always encourage veterinarians, for instance, that want to go into zoological medicine, do an internship in medicine and surgery. Become very good at what you do first. Because when you move into zoological medicine, there's a whole other bunch of problems and challenges like tranquilization and handling the animal once to solve a problem, because when they wake up, that's it. And you want to make sure that your skills of diagnostic ability, of interventional ability are really top, because these are endangered species. They present, like I said, other challenges. So the same goes for technicians. I think you've done a great job, Anonymous, by starting in an emergency practice, because you're going to see a lot of individuals, you're going to see them in crisis situations, and you're going to become astute at that. So I would encourage you to do it for a year or two. You then become a very valuable member to a zoological institution or an aquarium when you say you've got that background, as opposed to just coming right out of school. So keep up the good work. That's how I would pursue it. I'd start to maybe find an institution you're interested in, start spending a Saturday there so they get to know you, you get to know them. Because again, when you tranquilize animals, it's a very challenging time. Everybody's got to be on their toes. And you can't make mistakes because people can get hurt, killed, or you lose the animal. So you've done good work already, and I would just continue down the same path.
Excellent answer. Thank you. And I have Kathy Abrams, whose hand is raised. So Kathy, I'm giving you the ability to talk. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Hello.
Oh, not Kathy.
Like Kathy.
It's the better half.
Oh,
The other half, Mark.
okay. Ask your question. I have to really, to be transparent, Dr. Abrams and I have met before.
I just wanted to put in the comment that I was highly offended that you poked that elephant in the eye.
He's an
Good night.
ophthalmologist.
Bye. Good job.
Thanks, Ken. You're wonderful.
Thanks.
Awesome. Okay.
That was not a plant. I didn't know it was coming.
So I mean, I'm sure there's multiple of these, but Beatrice is wondering, what is the most beautiful experience you've had with wildlife animals?
Oh, the one that comes to mind is in the book. It's Betty, an orangutan. And I had the pleasure as being a veterinarian for the Stone and Franklin Park Zoo. The Stone Zoo was right across the street from our house. And I had the keys to the zoo. This is like fantasy for anyone that loves animals like I do. I had the ability when the zoo closed at night to walk around the zoo with my wife, and the animals got to know us. We'd go by the sea lions, they'd bark. We'd go past the peacocks, they'd display their feathers. We'd go by the hoofstock, they wouldn't get scared. They'd stay right in front of the fence line. We could just take this walk every night. And Betty Orangutan was there, and she got to know us. Well, time passed, and Betty had a baby. And when orangutans have a baby, they hold them really close to their chest. You almost can't make out what sex the baby is even for the first period of time. And she, had her baby, and she'd sit in the back of her holding area and exhibit and look at people, but she was really shy and very protective. Well, about 5 months passed, and our daughter Laura and Emily was born, and we had to take a month off from going to the zoo. When the month was over, we went through the zoo, and my wife, Chris, had Emily, she now goes by Emily, Laura and Emily, in a sack in front of her. And we walked through the zoo, and we came to Betty's area. And to our surprise and amazement, Betty came down off the top, walked right up to the glass, opened her arms and held up her baby. And I turned to my wife, and I said, do the same. And she held up Laura and Emily, and I could see her eyes, my wife, Chris, and Betty's eyes meet. And it was like, okay, motherhood crosses species lines. They were consoling each other. They were supporting each other. It was like a moment in time. And I'm glad I didn't have phones and cameras and everything like we do today, because it probably would have taken my mind off it. I was able to sit back. It was an evening night, a night in the evening in April, because my daughter was born in March. And it was just, it told me we're all alike, even not just different people, animals, primates. A chimp is 98.8% genetically like us. They have emotions, they have feelings. They're not just like other people. It's not just an animal. No, they really do have feelings. I'll leave you with one other very emotional one. And it's not with a zoo animal, but it was when my father passed away. And I got the call, I picked up the phone, was told that my dad had died. Wasn't expected, actually. And I went and sat in the chair. I didn't really sit in the chair, I fell in the chair. And I just was drained. Well, Ren was my dog at the time, now passed away, miss her terribly. She was a Jack Russell Beagle cross. And so she had 3 speeds: running, eating, and sleeping. At this moment, she jumped in my lap, looked at me with a look that said, it's going to be all right, and just laid there. It was uncharacteristic for her to do this. She knew that I was devastated. So I've had one other experience like that with a golden retriever that picked up my feelings. One dog that didn't know me. It was at an event. The dog was known for pet assisted therapy. And I was at a party, but I saw something that bothered me, some people that I wasn't on the same page with. I was anxious about going past them. And this golden retriever came by, I petted her, and she leaned into me. And the owner actually even said, oh, that's surprising. I said, well, I'm a veterinarian, maybe she knows it. Later on, I came up to her and I said, I was going through a real anxiety attack just then. I knew it, she said. And this dog picked up on it. It's dramatic what our animals feel and recognize in us. Pheromones, all kinds of things tell them that. Thank you for the question.
That was amazing. I have another question from Janie. So Janie, I'm going to allow you to talk again. Go ahead and unmute. There we go.
Well, this is sort of anticlimactic after that story, but I just was wondering what you say to people who are thinking about getting into this profession in one of the many different aspects of it that they can do. What do you tell them about it now?
Oh, good question. It's no surprise to probably the veterinarians and the vet techs online right now that our profession's in crisis to some extent. People are underpaid, especially vet techs. And, there's studies, we all know this about the suicide rate in our profession. Maybe the most of any healthcare profession now, which surprises people to hear that, because everybody as a child at some point in their life, it may be a brief second, wants to be an animal, wants to be Dr. Dolittle. Why? Because we learned to read with looking at animals. We learned to our ABCs with animals. I mean, we become attached to them as children. So they think it's a glorious profession, and it is. I'm one of those people that if I could do this all over again, and I say this at the end of my book, I would do it without a question. And I've had some really challenging and not so great times once in a while, but I feel blessed. The crisis we really face is that one study I saw said 65% of veterinarians, if someone said they wanted to go become a vet tech or a veterinarian, will talk them out of it. That's a shame. Now, if someone comes to me and asks, like Janie asked, what do I say? It's a wonderful profession. It's tough, though. If you're going into it because you want to become rich, if you're going into it because you want the status, if you're going into it because you want to work 9 to 5, give it up. But if you're going into it because your passion is there, and you're willing to put in the time, and you're willing to deal with the challenges, and I would share some of those challenges with them, and I have. I love mentoring students. And if there anybody's listening now, my email is mgdvm007@gmail.com. Write to me. I'll be glad to respond if you're thinking of going into veterinary medicine or veterinary technician. Because I want to encourage the right people to go into it. And when I say right people, again, it's not people who think it's glorious and easy. It's hard, but it's so impactful. I can't tell you, even the person that says, I don't want to become a veterinarian because I can't deal with euthanizing an animal. I surprise them by saying, I'm glad I can be able to euthanize an animal when it's right to do and take them out of pain and suffering. I feel like I serve a purpose. So even the hardest part of our job, to me, is rewarding when you do it properly and in a proper way. And helping people get through the financial crises of treating their animals, educating them about it. It's a great profession for the right person. And that's how I would talk to them.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie.
And we do still have quite a few questions. So if you're okay with going over time, I'm okay with it. I'm going to keep going.
I'm fine.
Perfect.
Folks, I really appreciate you all being here. I hope you've had a good time. Hope you've had a beverage to drink. But thank you for your time. I'd be glad to go as long as you want, Stephanie.
Perfect. So this is somewhat similar to a question that you answered earlier, but do you have any tips? This is from Priscilla, I should mention. Do you have any tips when going into a zoological internship? Are there any supplies you would recommend keeping on hand? This is an LVT planning on pursuing an internship for her bachelor's degree.
Well, as we said earlier, what's it, Priscilla? Good question. You may have heard earlier I talked about at least the training that you want to get, and that you want to prepare yourself by becoming really good at some area of being a vet tech, whether it's radiology, emergency medicine, but get your hands and your mind and your ability to know what the drugs are on the counter. Because when you're in a zoological situation, they don't have time to explain basic medicine. To diagnose, see a lot of diabetic dogs and help treat them so you understand diabetes. Because you can't learn diabetes on a gorilla. You can't learn that disease on a condor. Not that they get diabetes, but every mammal does. So you've got to learn a lot before you apply for that. And you have to have a hands-on experience. As far as equipment, a big bottle of wine helps. But, a mindset that this is not just another animal. You're dealing with endangered species. Not that they're worth more or more valuable, but you can't make mistakes. So it goes back to really being on your toes, which you should be anyway with any animal. But be aware of them. Learn about their behavior, because so much of zoological medicine is based on behavior. Because it's not just the animal can't talk now. They don't have an owner to explain what's going on. You've got to observe it, or have someone else observe it. And as a technician, you play a really important part in that. And be open to working with other professionals. I think this is important for all veterinarians. I may surprise people with this, but I am hesitant when a person goes into this profession and says, I'm doing it because I like animals more than people. That's not a person I would hire. That's not a person that I think should go into this profession. Why? Because a substantial part, look at the stories they've told tonight. Most of them involve people. Veterinary medicine, when you see a physician, and you may not like them, but if you're hurting, you're going to take their advice because you're hurting. When you're the owner of an animal, if I don't get your respect, you're not going to listen to what I said, and the animal's going to suffer. So I have to win you over. When you're in a zoo, you're working with keepers, and they put their heart and soul into those animals. They see them every day. They see them born. They see them die. As Marty Becker has said, as a professional, we see animals from cradle to grave. So you have to be on your toes, and you have to, I said, work with other professionals. An example I will give you is, when we put down a gorilla at the Stoner Franklin Park Zoo, we always had an anesthesiologist from human medicine. In a female's case, we always had an obstetrician there. Whatever area we were working on with that grade 8, we had their counterpart from human medicine, because intubating a gorilla is like intubating a person more than it is a dog. Different equipment. The story goes that we had it was Gigi under anesthesia, and she started to get RAWs in her lungs, moist sounds that she was collecting moisture. I'm there as the zoo director, but I'm a veterinarian. And the technician notices it, announces it. What do? They turn to me. Dr. Goldstein, what do you want to do? Dr. Mark, well, let's give him some atropine. What dose? I'm used to the dose of 1 milligram per pound in a dog. So that's what I said, 400, 500 milligrams. The anesthesiologist from human medicine turns to me and goes, Mark, you're in charge, but I'm going to tell you, if you gave that to a person, you'd kill him. The dose in a person is 1/10 of a milligram per pound. It was 10 times the dose that they were about to give. If I was not open to that person being there, if I hadn't made sure that person was there, not open to taking their advice, being able to admit, I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm wrong, you're going to make a big mistake. So you have to have people skills. Perfect them. Perfect your communication skills. Perfect your observation skills. Those are the tools that I would bring to it. Nothing material necessarily, because they're going to have all of that, except a bottle of wine, just to take care of the stress at the end of the day. I think that's the best advice I could give.
No, that was excellent. Thank you.
I hope Priscilla thinks that too.
And Wendy is asking, with so many shelters filling with abandoned and hurt animals, how can they encourage the public for financial support? So locally, their Humane Society has been closed, as many of the workers and volunteers. So the fundraising events have been put on hold. So really suggestions as to how to move forward.
I am fortunate enough in my career, 40 years, that I've raised over $100 million to help animals. Built exhibits, built a Humane Society. And I have to say, my belief, first of all, is if you're not already, put up an honest, truthful, trusting impression on people. Don't BS them. Don't hide things. And don't try to get money, I believe, by desperation. They're going to die if you don't help. I'm sorry, you know who I'm talking about. There's a commercial where you see a slamming cage and a desperate animal behind it. That's not the way to raise money. That's not the way to get people to adopt animals, in my mind. And I've been very successful, I think, over my career. We were always positive. It was, please support us because we'll be more successful. Think about it. If you're in a for-profit world and I come to you and I have a business that's not doing well, and I say to you, John, I need your money or else we're going to go bankrupt. He's going to say, have a nice bankruptcy. As opposed to, John, I need you to support us because we can be successful. We can be better than we are. It's a different take on raising funds and resources. The pandemic has made it harder, but it's not those big fancy affairs that really raise money for us. It's people believing in us. It's the envelopes that come in. So come up with creative ways to do it. In the book, I tell a story of walking through the campus that we were building. It wasn't a big event. It was a one-on-one introduction meeting with Mrs. Cargill, who's passed away now. And if you're from Minnesota, you know the family I'm talking about, extraordinarily wealthy. And I walked through the half-built building, and we got to a point where the veterinary hospital was. And I showed her that we were putting in these windows that were electrostatic windows so that we could push a button and it could go clear, so that schools and people that visited us could watch the veterinary hospital in working. And when there's that time that came that maybe something would be too offensive or too difficult to see, you could push a button and it would go cloudy. When I described that to her, and I will take credit here, I usually never do this, that was my idea. And I said, it was just sort of this thing. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "You guys have thought of everything. I'm so pleased to be part of this." Why do I tell you that story? Because she was very private about her life. And we only knew her as our angel at that point. We didn't know her name until she passed away. The next day, the chair of her foundation called me and said, "Our angel wants to talk to you. And be prepared to tell her how much more you need to finish the fundraising campaign for the building." I had been given a year by the board to raise that money, and we were only 1 month into it. And she talked to me, and she told me how pleased she was with her visit and how honored she was to be part of it, and how much will it cost to complete that silly campaign. And I said, $1,570,000. And she said, "You'll have your check in the mail." That's how you raise money, by being transparent, honest, and making people part of what you're doing. Not alienating them, not scaring them. That's just my philosophy, and it's worked. So I would encourage this organization to come up with creative ways to get that message out. Hope that helped.
That's beautiful. So I have a couple of questions. I'm going to group two of them together. One of them is from an anonymous person, and the other one is from Daniel. But they're curious what pets you have and what your favorite animal is. So I'm grouping those two together because they could probably be answered.
Well, if it was my wife answering the question, the answer would be, "What pet does she have?" It's me. And I'm house trained most of the time. But right now, actually, I don't have any pets in the house. Ren passed away a bit ago, and I've got some issues, health problems, and people say, "How can't you have a pet?" My answer to that is pediatricians love kids, but they don't have them their whole life. I love animals, and I babysit for them. I'm now retired from veterinary medicine, but I love helping friends and friends of friends with their cases and explaining things pro bono. I love mentoring students, but there's a time and a place. And right now you can tell my friends that I said were helping me, they're now in the back here. They're my pets right now. I have grandchildren where, if not for the pandemic, my wife and I would be traveling and going out and seeing the grandkids, and it's just not conducive right now. And some of it is I'm still remorseful. I've got to deal with that and know when it's the right time for me. But right now I don't have any pets. And I forgot the second part of the question now.
Your favorite animal?
Oh, my favorite animal? I learned not to answer this as a zoo director because I would alienate the rest of the staff. You can probably guess by listening to me what it might be. If I were to take one animal, it just always comes up in my mind as majestic and smart and cunning and capable. It's a tiger. They're just remarkable animals, but so are so many other animals. I mean, I'm stuck in my house. You would think I'm nuts. My wife does. I guess this is my pet right now. I have a camera outside, and it films a pack rat every night. And I look at endless, movies of it. And I now realize by looking at the markings of its ear that I have more than one, and I've got to be concerned about that. But I'll move them out of there without being violent, without hurting them, using lights, using sound. But right now I'm filming them, and I look at it every night. The way I knew it was my wife is a physical therapist, and she goes and sees patients every day, and it's quite stressful for her, and both of us. She's exposed potentially. She comes home and she has to take all of her clothes off in the backyard and leave them and run in the house. That's one of the unintended benefits to me. But she leaves her sandals out every night. And we'd come down some mornings and one sandal would be on the other side of the deck. And that's what cued me. I'm going to put a camera out here. I now have hours of films watching this rat take things. So they're all pets to me. You know, I love interacting with animals in one way or another, but I don't have one in the house right now.
Yeah. So we have a couple more. I have one hand raised and I have one more question. You've slightly answered this question, but I'll ask it again. This is from Ella. Having held so many different animal care positions throughout your career, how do you think the knowledge from each transferred to the others, and what knowledge from those more unique positions, which many of us may never have had the opportunity to hold, can you share for those of us in or hoping to get into the veterinary profession?
That's a great question. That's a new one for me. Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about the skills other than the technical ones, because we've covered that earlier in the evening, you know, the course that you would take. The ones that you don't think of, Angel Memorial taught me that you can push yourself much harder than you can ever expect. You know, we did an overnight every week where you were up for 36 hours every week for 14 months, except for the 1 week you got off. And, you know, you'd think you would be so exhausted, and you are, but your brain learns to do okay with that. I don't encourage it, but I was amazed at what I was capable of doing. And it sticks with me today. I can push myself to extremes that I didn't realize I had in me. That was one of the things I learned. It also gave me a sense of self-esteem and confidence. When you're an intern at Angel, when I was an intern, in the middle of the night, a torsion comes in, which, if for folks that don't know, that's when the stomach bloats with air and then turns. It's an immediate emergency and crisis, and it's a difficult surgery. I had 6 of them during my internship, and all of them lived. But it means you're going into surgery for a number of hours. And when you see the first one, it's like, I know I've seen doctors do it, I've watched people do it, but now it's my case, and I'm going to get into it. And it really builds a sense of confidence. You know, build that up. And that's what Angel gave me. I left Angel and went into the zoo world. What I learned there was, again, how challenging, even though I'd been an extern in them at the National Zoo for a couple of years, I realized that there's more politics involved in it. And you have to deal with that. It's the reality of life. Many zoos are municipally run. Other than that, people really criticize, should we have them in the first place? So you have to learn to communicate very well, really know your message. First, be introspective and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why do we have zoos and aquariums? Why do we take animals and put them in captivity or have them breed in captivity? Because we rarely take them out of the wild anymore. Credible institutions are, you know, reproducing them responsibly. But you have to have a message. You have to educate people. It's not just, oh, they'll know I'm a good guy because I'm taking care of the animals. They want to know why. And they don't want you to BS them again. So I learned to communicate very well. An interesting thing technically you wouldn't think about, coming from the zoo world, I knew about changing exhibits from the old cages to, you know, these beautiful exhibits that zoos have now that show off the proper behavior of animals, and they're more humane. Well, when I went to the San Diego Humane Society, we embraced the idea. If you see the San Diego Humane Society's Campus for Animal Care, when you walk in, all the animals are in rooms, not cages. And they're all decorated so that people come in and see a living room, and they can see that animal in their living room. Well, guess where it came from? Exhibit design from zoos. I brought that, you know, that was in my blood. I got it. And we were able to raise money for it. And you can tell by the way I'm explaining it, that passion rolls over into the donor. When they know you believe in it, they believe in it. And I learned that from my different careers. I think that's the best answer I can give.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And Janie, I'm going to allow you to talk. You have one more question, and I don't want to hold us up anymore because I know we've gone over about 20 minutes. So go ahead, Janie.
Hey, I think I already had my questions answered, so you can move on.
Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Hi, Janie. I see 76 people in the chat room. What's going on in there?
Oh yeah, we've been chatting it up in there. So no, thank you so much. And the final question I'm going to ask is, when are you doing another book?
When am I doing another book? Huh, interesting. Whoops, am I still there?
Yep.
Oh, okay, because I just tried to move this over. You know, I've been asked that many times, and, you know, this is the book that I wrote. It was a labor of love. To tell you quite frankly, when I wrote this book, I started out truly writing it for my grandkids. I wanted Gwendolyn and RB, Richard Bruce, to know who Papa was, because they're 8 and 6 years old now. When they're 20, I'm going to be a pretty old guy. So I wanted them to maybe learn something that I learned from life. And I wrote it as life lessons learned as a veterinarian. I assume you can see the book now, right, Stephanie?
Behind you, I can see it. Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you want to share again, you absolutely can. I unshared your screen so we could just see you talking. But if you'd like to share again, please do.
Hold on one second. Let me just do that. I clicked in the wrong place, and if I can't do that easily, yeah, I'll be able to do it now. That's my grandkids again. Okay. So if you notice, there's a subtitle. Is that up now, Stephanie? The book?
Did you already put it on?
Oh, I have to put it on. Oh, that's right. Sorry, folks, for the.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go. Now we got it. If you notice below the title, it says, "What Animals Large and Small Taught Me About Life, Love, and Humanity." And I wrote it with that in mind for my grandkids. I really never. My high school English teachers are rolling over in their grave. They don't understand how Mark could write a book. But I did. And, you know, it's like everything else I've done in life. If my passion was there, I could do it to excellence. If it wasn't, man, it was like pulling teeth. So I had a purpose. And I think that's what you have to have when you write a book first, is your goal. Why are you writing it? Not just because I want to write it and have my name in print. And I was writing it for my grandkids. And you know, at the beginning, I said, Marty Becker is a wonderful person. He's been my mentor. He really has. I wrote about 6 chapters and I sent them to him. And he met my wife and I in San Diego, and we had a drink, and he looked at me in the eyes and he said, Mark, you've got a real book here. You're a unicorn. You know, you've worked in animal welfare and you've worked in zoos. You've been in clinics. And he encouraged me to write the whole thing and see if I could get it published. And like other authors, I, was rejected a couple of times by agents. And then Marty recommended, with his help, to send it to HCI, who did the chicken soup books, and Fear-Free, from Fearful to Fear-Free. And they're a publisher. You usually have an agent go that route. But I went right to the publisher, and they accepted it. And so I had a national publishing contract. Why do I answer the question that way? I have to admit, it was 2.5 years to do that. And I don't have that burning sensation inside to write a second adult book. But since my grandkids are so important in my life, what I feel in embers right now that I'll return to flames is writing a children's book. And then I get excited. You want to be excited about writing because it becomes both your mistress and your dictator. You love doing it. Sometimes you just, oh God, do I have to write? My mind's blank. Sometimes you're out at dinner though, and you get an idea, you want to run home and go to the computer. It's not very social. So I don't have that feeling for a second adult book. But I'm thinking of taking this and somehow adapting a story or a couple of stories into a children's book. And it keeps mulling over in my mind, and if that's in my future, it'll come to be, I hope. So that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm gonna cut off questions at that point, just because we're about 30 minutes over. So I want to thank everybody for attending today. If you have questions relating to this series of webinars or about Fear-Free certification, please email us at wags@fearfreepets.com. I also entered Dr. Mark's email in the chat box, so feel free to take that before I end this webinar. And I'll also type our customer service email in the chat section as well. So stay safe and healthy, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Mark. That was amazing.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I love doing this. Like I said, I love communicating and sharing what I've been blessed to be able to do in my life. So thank you folks for sticking with it and asking such great questions. And I wish everybody a good night. And again, my heartfelt feelings out to people affected by the hurricanes and the fires and this crazy world we're living in right now.
Yeah.
I hope I got you to laugh and smile a little bit tonight. That's my goal.
It looked like it, and I don't know, I was definitely. So thank you, and have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night, folks.